in Vietnam. And having done a series of lectures once on the art of coercion and the theory and practice of blackmail, and analytical study of the use of threats, it was a specialty of mine, academic. And so I was applying that to our bombing program against North Vietnam, which had already been called, I didn't invent the term, coercive diplomacy, affecting negotiations by bombing and by threatening bombing. And the reason I mention all this is that I remember to a very high-level bunch of people, former assistant secretaries and secretaries, not secretaries, assistant secretaries and deputy assistant secretaries in this group. I happened to ask in the course of it something I didn't think of the word for. I said, what's the word for a kind of coercion that doesn't involve simply threats, a threatening process, which is the essence of coercion, a threatening process that actually involves hurting someone in the course of it, actually bombing them, which is what we were doing. We were bombing them in order to threaten them with more bombing if they didn't do what we wanted. And nobody could think, we came up with a couple terms, but didn't get a good answer to that. Okay. I've already copied the Pentagon Papers and those things. In the spring of 1971, I had given them now to Fulbright, the papers in 69 of the Finland Foreign Relations Committee. He didn't bring them out because he was afraid he would be punished by the Defense Department for putting out these classified documents. They couldn't say he'd done anything illegal. He had a right as a senator, certainly, to do this. But they might switch foreign military aid appropriations from his committee to armed services. And so he preferred to let me put them out, in fact, and not put them out himself, which he could do without risk. So a year goes by, and the question, he hasn't put them out, so the question is, should I give them to the newspapers? At which point, Patricia here said to me, and she had only, I'd never let her see any of these papers up to this point, and didn't want her fingerprints on them. And didn't, so she could say, I had no part in this. I didn't. So she said, here you're talking about going to the press with this now, and Fulbright doesn't think it's important enough to put it out. What makes you so sure that it's worth it? Because Fulbright had said, having decided not to put them out, he said, well, at first he was very enthusiastic, but then when he thought better of it, he said, well, after all, isn't it only history? And so Patricia raised this and said, how can you be so sure it's worth it? I said, well, I can't. But, they may be right. But they haven't read them. I'm the only one who's read these papers. So I have to rely on my own judgment here. I can't rely on their judgment. And I think it is worth it. Well, on another discussion we had on the same subject at the same time, I said, this is the first 23-year record of imperial operations. And I'm sure if we look back at Assyria, or Rome, or Greece, or any of the Egyptian empires, their minutes would read the same. But we don't have those. And this is a record of what a big country does that wants to intimidate and bomb into submission over a 23-year period. So it's, even if it doesn't have an immediate effect, it will be enlightening in the future. But at this point, in about February 71, I said to Patricia, okay, I think the time has come when you have to see some of these and form an opinion so you can give me your judgment. So I picked out some documents, including documents from the very period I worked on, 64, 65, where we were preparing the bombing and beginning to carry it out. Just one chapter of this 7,000-page study. So she went into the bedroom, basically a one living room and a bedroom. And she went in for quite a while, came out, and there were tears in her eyes. And she said, listen to this. And she started quoting from things that she'd read there. And I remember the quotes because I read them when I was in the Pentagon. They were descriptions of the nature of the bombing program we wanted to carry out. They called it, some people said there should be an on-off aspect to it. Give them a little relief and then start it again. They called that the water drip technique, or waterboarding, we would now call it. Another turn of the screw is worthwhile. Raise the ratchet on this, like the torture. Anyway, raising the ratchet. Another turn. Oh, increasing the level of pain. And Patricia said, crying, this is the language of torturers. And that went through me like a knife, because here I was 40 years old in the government. I've been in this process since 1961, 64, and I never realized that what I was in, which I was against and wanted to stop, and already saw as a kind of murder. But I'd never thought of this torture, which happened to be one of the things I said to myself, I will never, ever be part of. And I had been part of that. And it was torturing a country. The point of it was to torture a country. Now, it isn't actually the best word for that. We didn't use the word terror or terrorism very much. Terrorism was the better word. It was strictly terrorism. It was killing civilians, not just harming them. Killing them in order to intimidate others and affect their the deliberate killing of non-combatants for a combatant purpose. So if she'd said terrorism again, I would have reacted similarly. But torture was the word that was in my head. And it was shattering, actually, to realize that I had managed to deny that to myself, even at this late date when I'd already given the Pentagon Papers. Well, that's the kind of perception that leads to the kind of leak that the Pentagon can't stop, like Bradley Manning's or the WikiLeaks or the Pentagon Papers, because if they implement all of those new restrictions that they have in mind, which is 20 pages of them, that wouldn't stop somebody who's willing to pay a cost. Because mostly it has to do with being able to detect who has downloaded something, now in the digital age, who has downloaded something that they shouldn't have had access to, who has been downloading too much stuff, like Brandon. And you can later, retroactively get at them and punish them. But if they're willing to be punished, you really can't stop that. And it could get out. And WikiLeaks exists to facilitate people who are willing to take that risk. And actually they want to lower the risks by making it anonymous, truly anonymous. And indeed, Bradley Manning might well have gotten away with it, even with that huge volume, had he not unburdened himself to Adrian Lamo for reasons that really we don't know why he did that. Those parts of the chat logs have not been released. And Wired magazine here in San Francisco has refused to put out the 75% of the chat logs that might well reveal how Lamo got Manning to tell him what he was doing, and which Lamo reported to the FBI. And who got Lamo to do that? It's another story. So anyway, we need WikiLeaks. We need unauthorized disclosures. Yes, there can be some that are harmful. There are secrets that deserve to be kept and should be kept. Which, by the way, Julian Assange agrees. He has, for example, redacted, since the first releases, all the names of informants, and fairly effectively. No informant has been harmed, according to the Pentagon. So he doesn't say everything should come out. But it's not secret, it's not leaks or excessive openness that got us into Iraq or Afghanistan or Yemen. I'll get to that. Or Pakistan right now. It is not too little secrecy. On the contrary, it's the culpable secrecy, the abuse, if you like, of the secrecy system, to conceal, above all, internal dissent, and above all, internal dissent on the grounds that certain policies are criminal, or murderous, or reckless, to go to a larger category here, reckless, dangerous, foolish, stupid, like Vietnam, like Iraq, like Afghanistan. That's the secrecy that has put enormous numbers of lives, not just at risk, but killed them. And